Hey guys, welcome back to our Wednesday, April 1st video lecture. Today we're going to be talking about the legacy of the New Deal. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So we should be on slide number 2. Okay, New Deal policies did not end the Great Depression. A lot of people think that FDR came into office, the first and second New Deals went into effect, and all of a sudden the economy was cured. Not the case. Many people would struggle even into the 1940s. Okay, but so much of what the New Deal accomplished would set the nation up for success, right? When the Second World War comes about, right? So many of those landmark pieces of legislation, Social Security is the one that comes to mind immediately. We have those even today. So even though it didn't necessarily end the Great Depression right then and there, it would certainly set the country up for success. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to our next slide. Our unalienable rights given to us in the Declaration of Independence, right? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? What about life, liberty, and economic security? Okay, this is what FDR said. One thing he really wanted to ensure was that Americans would have economic security as a human right. This is what he said about it. This republic had its beginning and grew to its present strength under the protection of certain inalienable political rights, among them the right of free speech, free press, free worship, trial by jury, freedom from unreasonable searches and seizures. As our nation has grown in size and stature, however, as our industrial economy expanded, these political rights proved inadequate to assure us equality in the pursuit of happiness. We have come to a clear realization of the fact that true individual freedom cannot exist without economic security and independence. In essence, all of the freedoms we enjoy, we are only able to fully enjoy if we have economic liberties, if we have economic security and independence. Without those things, our other freedoms cannot possibly be protected. This was something that FDR wanted to be a cornerstone of his legacy. Okay, moving on to slide number 4. Now, FDR continued to list a number of rights promised under the New Deal, including the right to a job, adequate wages, a decent home, medical care, good education. These are things that we all consider rights for us today. In the 1930s, many of these rights were up for discussion. And it was FDR and the Democrats who brought about many of these rights through the New Deal to the American people. Now, before the New Deal, private charities bore the responsibility of caring for the needy. The Depression's severity changed popular notions of charity, however. People knew that if things were to become very bad, the only way to support a society was with everyone supporting society. Americans began to accept that many people could not survive without public assistance, which again is a lasting legacy of the New Deal and the Great Depression. Okay, so moving on to slide number 5, the welfare state and Social Security. Most New Deal programs offered short-term relief for the immediate effects. Social Security was very, very different because it was not short-term relief. This was a long-term system, which was meant to help with financial services, unemployment benefits, social services, things like medical care and education, also helping to subsidize medications and housing. All right, the government is involved in all of these areas of our life, where prior to the New Deal, they were not. The fact of the matter is today, many Americans use government assistance, and without it, they could not get by. All right, now, many of these programs are known as entitlement programs. At the time, critics argued that government assistance undermined the American principle of self-reliance and individualism. Nevertheless, government assistance continues today in a wide array of programs, from health insurance for older Americans to things like food stamps for the poor and a parity price support for farmers. Okay, now these programs are known as entitlement programs. through which people who meet certain eligibility requirements are entitled to receive benefits. These programs would not exist without the New Deal. All right. So much, again, of what our life is today, so much of what we as a society depend on, even today in the year 2020, without Franklin Delano Roosevelt, many of these programs would not exist. And many Americans would find it much more difficult to live a comfortable life. Okay. So moving on to our next slide, slide number 7. Another notable legacy of the New Deal was the expanded role of government. Americans traditionally distrusted government power, and the country's founders believed in limited government because it protects against tyranny. Now, if we think back to where the United States came from, it would make a lot of sense why a strong central government would make a lot of people uneasy. Coming from the system that we lived under King George III of England, coming from a monarchy, it would make sense that our founders would set up a government that inherently limited the power and involvement of government. It's understandable. But as the United States grew, as our population grew, as our responsibility not only regionally in the Americas, but our responsibility around the globe began to grow, we realized that our government had to grow as well. And even though that may not have been something that many Americans were very happy about, it was something that most Americans understood needed to happen, right? And if you see our political cartoon there, my New Year's resolution is to lose this belly. Oh, who am I kidding? Right? With as much as people talk about trying to trim the size of our government, the fact of the matter is it is becoming ever more difficult to do so. All right, because of the number of people that rely on these programs. Now, here's the question with government programs: how do you fund them? All right, well, it's obviously through federal revenue. Well, each federal program required a new agency to administer it. All right, enlarging the government bureaucracy, the individuals who work in the government. So, in essence, every program you create, you are creating jobs. Every job you create, you increase a burden on your revenue system, right? Well, to get all of these started at the same time, FDR had to resort to what's known as deficit spending, or in essence, borrowing against the next year's GDP, right? Spending money that you don't necessarily have right then and there to fund the programs. This obviously angered a lot of conservatives, and understandably so. We should want to have somewhat of a balanced budget, right? Is spending more money than you make only leads to problems down the road. Now, big versus small government. Moving on to our next slide, slide number 9. Conservatives reacted strongly to government's growth in size and power. In 1936, one critic wrote that FDR had transformed government into a highly complex, bungling agency, throttling businesses and bedeviling the private lives of free people. That's a bit exaggerative. But the truth is that the government did become much more involved in people's lives. And with that, there is a certain loss of liberty. They're just inevitably, right? The more involved, the more regulated something is, certainly the less personal liberty you're going to have. Now, liberals, on the other hand, defended the expanded role of the federal government as essential to creating a good and just society. Right? Now, in all of those efforts, again, to create a good and just society, we cannot forget the cost. It was wildly expensive to fund these programs. Okay. Now, the modern world is framed by FDR. This is slide number 10. As a result of the New Deal, today's government is not only bigger, but it also continues to directly influence people's lives, right? Whether it be the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, known as FDIC, whether it be the numerous regulations through things like the SEC, the Social Security benefits, unemployment benefits, all of these programs helped revolutionize America not only at the time, but revolutionized our country into the modern day. And that really is the legacy of FDR and the New Deal. Now, the amazing thing about FDR is that he is going to be elected 2 more times. All right. So typically, when we're talking about our executives, we'll talk about as much as we've talked about with FDR, and then we move on to another executive. Well, not only is FDR president during the Great Depression, he's going to be the president of the United States throughout the majority of World War II. So much of what he does is yet to come. And we're going to begin talking about FDR as a wartime president, not only tomorrow, but certainly into next week. Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video lecture. Feel free to pause it, go back, get your notes, whatever you need. But I hope you're well, and I look forward to speaking with you soon. Goodbye.